and lots of money for, well, depends which way you look at it, for the Chancellor, Philip Hammond, in his budget next week. Ahead of it, one Welsh Labour MP has made a request for consideration. This is a Swansea East MP, Carolyn Harris, who's urged the Chancellor to introduce a fund to cover council charges for child funerals. She's previously spoken of the worry of the cost of burying her own son, who died at the age of 8. Back in March, the First Minister, Carolyn Jones, announced plans to end child burial fees here. But now Ms Harris wants the same to apply to the rest of the UK, and she joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
You asked a question, didn't you, to the Prime Minister yesterday?
Did
you get the response you wanted?
No, I had an awful response. It was so awful. I felt quite sad for a few hours later, and went and sat in my room and licked my wounds, because I just felt it was a technical answer, and it wasn't. There was no emotion in it. And to share a secret with you, with PMQs, if you want a good answer, you will let the Prime Minister know what you're going to ask. So I'd given her the opportunity to know what I was going to ask. So I thought I would have got a much better answer than I did.
And the answer was what?
The answer was saying that there are reviews set up to look at different kinds of benefits and bereavement support. It talked about a private member's bill, which is about bereavement leave for parents. But it wasn't an answer to the question I asked. It was just a shopping list of what the government are doing already. There was nothing new in there. So I am really, really disappointed.
Were you able to impress upon the Prime Minister the reality of that situation? Because unless you've been there, I guess, it's hard to understand how the cost of a funeral might add to the burden that you're already carrying in those circumstances.
Yeah. When I first made the speech back in November last year, I was myself personally very emotional. I revisited a time in my life which was really, really painful for me, and if the Prime Minister didn't get just how painful it is from that speech, then I give up. I don't know how to convey how difficult and emotional a time it is. I just don't know. I've had so much outpouring of sympathy from the Prime Minister every time it's come up, but I don't want sympathy. Parents don't want the sympathy. They want the practical support to help them at that darkest hour. Because believe you me, the last thing you want to think about is cost. The last thing that you need to be worrying about is, where am I going to get the money for this from? It's a dreadful, dreadful time, and I'm really disappointed.
And how much does a funeral cost for a child? What are we talking about here?
Well, I think an average cost of a funeral for anyone, it depends on what they want, but sort of a basics probably is between £2,000 and £4,000. But that's for everything that you'd have associated with the funeral. The co-op funeral home will do children's funerals up until 18 free. So you only need to cover the cost of the local authority costs. Now that's probably about £700-800 per funeral. You know, I can tell you that a couple of months ago I was actually sitting in a funeral director's. I'd gone there, it was the co-op, I'd gone in there to talk about the children's funeral plan, and there was a couple there who'd actually lost twins. They died shortly after birth, and the parents were distraught because they thought they had to pay for this funeral. And I saw the relief on their face when we were able to say to them, and it was purely coincidental I was there, when we were able to say there is no cost. And this was a young couple, you know, so I've seen how it affects other people, but I personally had that awful experience myself, and I'm just desperate to protect others from that.
And it wouldn't be a huge amount of money, I guess. What are you asking? You're asking for 10 million to be set aside.
Yeah, but that was a gross estimation, if I'm honest. I mean, you're probably looking at less than 5 million in real terms. That was based on 5,000 children at the highest possible local authority costs, which are only really in very affluent constituencies, interestingly enough, and that's £4,000. But the average is in between 700 and 800. So it's nowhere near the 10 million I asked. It's nowhere near the 5 million I'm guesstimating it is now.
Right.
And with Wales
you've got another week, Carolyn. You've got another week.
I keep on pressing.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oliver.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
That's Carolyn Harris, the MP for Swansea East.